Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the USA for the first habitat species and the first video in the new format here at the Great Plains Wildlife Reserve. Start thinking about names for armadillos. As I mentioned last week, we will begin the day with a plan. Unheard of for this channel, I know, but it has already been very helpful to me. We're going to start off here with an outline of the building. This is a local zoo, so most of the enclosures will have some sort of indoor area where the animals can be kept overnight. In this case, it's a very simple square area with a sheltered guest viewing window. We'll have a door for the animals to access the outer area on the side. And then I think the exterior portion will be a circle, centering on the back right corner of the building. This drawing is a little bit off scale, but I think you can get what I'm trying to get at. Maybe we'll have a little outdoor shelter as well, so they can chill out of the sun without needing to come in. We'll need a staff area for food prep and examinations, so we'll add that to the side closest to the staff axis. To start with, a lot of the buildings will be quite close together for efficiency, but as we grow, we'll be able to start spreading out a bit. And finally, we can add in the guest paths. We want a wide main thoroughfare from the main courtyard. That will have some views on the habitat, but also a smaller offshoot that goes to the indoor section to see the animals up close. Hopefully the guests don't block this up immediately. And for the final touch, the staff access path. It's a simple build, relatively small for a species that doesn't need a lot of room, and we'll be building it as a business that needs to save money, so we'll be using low-cost, energy-efficient materials where we can. As I said, we are using breeze blocks for the bones of the building. Ooh, try saying that 3 times fast. It's a cheap, strong material that the animals won't be able to break through easily. It's a little bit ugly, but we can put a mask on it and cover up the guest angles a little bit to make it look presentable. For a small facility like this, nobody's expecting marble walls, so it's function over aesthetics at the moment. One of the benefits of working so close to the rest of the buildings is that I can use the same grid to keep everything aligned and spaced evenly. I just need to remember to split it from the group before moving anything, otherwise we're going to have some problems. Before we get too far in, let me remind you, if you are enjoying this video or any of the new format, you can show your support and appreciation with a like. And as always, if you want to see more like this, you can subscribe. We've already grown quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, so that target of 100 subs for 2026 is looking fairly doable. Anyway, back to the video. This is quite a large indoor space for today's species actually. The goal was to make something smaller so that we don't have to pay as much land tax right off the bat, and we get to keep as much of our operations within the electricity radius generated from the turnstiles. So there is a strong possibility that this might actually be too big. However, I do have some intention here for this layout, and indeed future layouts for indoor sections of habitats. The main viewing window has a perfect view of the resting area for the armadillos. You'll notice the back part is walled off to block the view. This is where the keepers will access the enclosure and where they'll access the outdoor section as well. And while there's no requirement for this to all be hidden, I want to create an undisturbed environment for the animals to be observed. No one comes here to see the keepers working, and as much as they are the backbone of my zoos, I would prefer that they be not seen or heard. Ghosts of animal care. As much as I've started off making this large enclosure, I will cut down the traversable area significantly with decoration, so there are certainly benefits to being spatially unaware, but we will get to that in a little bit. Okay, now we've got a lot to see in this part of the build, so before I start talking through the details, let's get a bit of background on our new inhabitants. The 9-banded armadillo is far from at risk of extinction. In fact, their numbers are growing rapidly. Probably supported by the warming climate, actually. As such, a good pair was not hard to come by. We acquired unnamed male and unnamed female from a veterinary rescue in Texas, where they're becoming ever more common. As a note, I will be taking suggestions for the names of these two, so submit your best armadillo names, one male and one female, into the comments of this video. I'll choose one of each. It might be both from the same person, or I might pick one that I like and then pick one from another person, so just put in your best guess and I'll make a choice. But, as I have said, we tend to get through a lot of generations in my zoos fairly quickly, so how this is going to work: the names that we pick will be passed down to every new pair that we keep, ensuring that the legacy of the name lives on. So, get your thinking caps on and let me know your best ideas. I did a little bit of research in preparation for this video, or I suppose I'm supposed to say I did a lot of research in preparation for the arrival of these animals, as a good keeper or owner of any animals probably should. I've been a bit hesitant to do fun facts or animal info in my videos, as I know a lot of other creators do that already, and I don't want to just copy someone else. However, I really like quirky animals and interesting little behaviours, so I'm going to start sprinkling some cool little facts throughout the videos. And I'll start with this. What does an armadillo remind you of? For me, it's always been a woodlouse, for obvious reasons. Maybe there's an element of pig about it. But have you ever thought it resembled a hippo? No? That's okay. This is more of a behavioural thing than an appearance, so the armadillo could hold its breath underwater for up to 6 minutes. And then it can move about by walking along the bottom of any, river, lake, whatever it is, like a tiny little hippopotamus. Alternatively, it can blow itself up like a floaty by swallowing air, inflating its digestive system and bobbing along the surface like a lost football. I have to say, one of those sounds significantly safer from an evolutionary perspective. I don't know if you've ever tried to swim while bloated, but it's not a comfortable experience. Returning to the build, we've used a recycled corrugated metal for the roofs. It's definitely seen better days, but it'll do the job for now. I have brought the guest covering part down, similarly to the shops in episode 1, just to give the building a bit more of an interesting shape. Square buildings are very easy to work with, but they require more effort to make look interesting. And when you make them out of breeze blocks, they need even more effort. As you'll remember, I designed this plan from above, so while that gives a great idea of the layout of the zoo moving forwards, it doesn't help with the silhouette that we can expect, so I'm still trying to make these decisions on the fly. I would really like to avoid flat roof buildings. Just seems like wasted potential for some reason. Like, imagine all the things and the details you could add to a flat roof. No. I really like these asymmetrical pitched roofs. They've a lot of character, and then to build on that, I've also added a panel facade across the front and the side walls to cover up a lot of that breeze block using light woods. It's giving a very Australian vibe at the moment, but I wanted to step away from those darker aesthetics that we relied on heavily in Trondheim. This panelling does not wrap around the entire building. I have used the trim throughout to tie it all together, however, we only need to cover up the areas that the guests will spend the most time looking at. Any more is a bit of a waste of resources. I also think that the contrast of the panelled wall to the bare breeze blocks creates an interesting appearance, more so than if we had the whole building looking the same all the way around. The guest viewing area here is not going to be fully enclosed, which may indeed be a mistake given the armadillos are more of an active species at night, which would make the indoor area even more of a hotspot. Not literally hot, obviously, just as the armadillos are sleeping a lot during the day, they'd be more visible indoors, and it would be easier to see them fully enclosed by blocking the light out to prevent glare on the glass, and then with the red night lights to see clearer inside. It just makes everything look a little bit more interesting. The outdoor area is meant to be a concrete bowl of sorts, or something similar to the Brocktree Bowl in the Highland Reserve for the badgers. Deep concrete walls to prevent escape via digging, perhaps with some sort of wire mesh along the bottom a few feet down to really keep them locked in. My initial plan was to have the outside sunk slightly so that the guests would be looking down into the habitat, but I didn't consider the location of the animal door, so to prevent it being that pit from the 300, I needed to make it a little more shallow than I wanted. It did come together nicely in the end. I used a 2-meter block instead of the usual 4-meter walls, so it would appear more smooth and circular. Obviously there's only so much you can achieve through this, so it's still a bit bumpy, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. The final part of the building phase of this video is the access door to the outside. Now, we saw in Trondheim a couple of my attempts at these pulley systems that can be operated from the outside of the habitat, and they were cool. I really like how they turned out. But this is not Norway, where energy efficiency is paramount. This is the United States, where automation is king. So we're going to make a door and attach a battery, so that the good old-fashioned power of electricity can raise the shutter at the push of a button. This is a similar thing to the Highland cowshed at the reserve actually, now that I think about it. The idea is thus. The mechanism will be built into the wall, which will be quite thick to house the shutter within. The door will be on tracks, with the bottom part mounted so that it can be moved up and down in the frame. This will then be connected to the mechanism at the top by a series of metal strips that can fold into each other at the top and compress into the casing when the door is open. Like an accordion. This is all then attached to a switch outside the habitat in the keeper prep room, where the door can be seen from the window and operated. Simple. Elegant. Possibly quite loud for a family of small creatures, but they'll get used to it. As you can see from our magnificent pre-prepared plan, we've actually done a pretty good job at sticking to it. Not bad at all. Phase 2 is interior design, starting with the prep area for the keepers. When I was building the polar bear enclosure in Trondheim, I made a set of simple shelves that were shown for about half a second in the final edit. Nonetheless, it sparked some inspiration for more staff utilities that, of course, will be purely decorative, but will add an extra bit of realism to the habitats. This is quite a narrow space, so it would suit more of a simple prep room than a storage or even a kitchen. So all I've made is a stainless steel workspace with some sliding doors to access the storage bit at the bottom for, food dishes or utensils, stuff to chop and prepare the foods that have been brought over, and some shelves up above that I've placed some t-shirts, maybe spare clothing in case of accidents, or a substitute for blankets for newborns or vet checks, practical stuff. I've also filled it with some other bits and pieces, some containers and some vegetables which are not strictly suitable for the armadillos, which live on a diet of bugs, but I didn't want to leave my first prep room bare. We then move on to the interior of the habitat area. I wanted to have a sandy coating on the floor. Concrete is efficient and easy to clean, but it's not natural and gives a very prison-like aesthetic. I used the savanna rocks to fill the floor area, in guest site anyway, to give that sandy colouring, even if it will still sound like rocks when the critters walk over it. You notice that I've used black plaster panels to line some of the walls inside. This is to create a dark room where the animals can be observed during the more active hours, being a nocturnal species. This is something I took inspiration from many different places around the UK. Usually you'd see all of the nocturnal species in a single building with low, red or sometimes blue, I think, lighting, so that you can see the animals but they aren't disturbed by the light. I added this into the wolverine habitat back at Trondheim, although there was probably also a heat lamp in that one as it's freezing cold. I don't think that will be necessary here as much. The floor was looking good, but still a bit flat, so I've used a lot of the rocks to add some terrain changes, some climbing opportunities. Not known for their climbing, armadillos, but they seem to enjoy perching atop their little hill. I also extended the stonework to the back walls and create some impression of a distant landscape to just add some appeal to the view, really. I was pretty confident I wouldn't have any trees or big plants to put into this to fill some of the space, so I had to lean on our old friend the rock a bit. I was mistaken, though, as you'll see. There are some really interesting twisted trees that seem to be dead. I'm pretty sure they're dead. They suited this landscape perfectly. Pair that with some dry grasses, hay bedding and the occasional splash of green resilient plants, and this night house is starting to look a little bit special. Oh, and throw in some aquatic rocks for texture and colour, you know what I like. Okay, so we've established that the armadillo is a peculiar little creature. A big pig-faced woodlouse that can hippo its way through a river or be used to rescue drowning guests at motels near the desert. So, what other feats are these tiny tanks capable of that might come as a surprise? Well, would you believe if I said they could dunk? No? Well, one of the armadillo's defense mechanisms is to jump vertically up to about 4 feet. I'm not sure how that's supposed to help them evade predators. I'm pretty sure my dog would be able to catch that out of the air with ease and bring it back to be thrown again. I can see it working as a confusion tactic, but at some point you'd expect the predators to catch on. After the 3rd or 4th one pops, you'd think they'd know to give it a second and catch it on re-entry to the ground. Of course, maybe it's not defensive at all. Maybe it's an attack, like Pokemon. Armadillo use Body Slam. Knock the predator unconscious and then escape to its burrow. I would look up the answer to these questions, but it's more fun to speculate, let's be honest. Talking of burrowing, these are burrowing animals, so there was certainly an opportunity to make this a lot easier for myself. I find the burrows to be a bit boring. I love the one that I had in the Arctic fox habitat, because I used a tree trunk to cover it up, per a suggestion from the comments, thank you for that. But there's only so much you can do to mask one. It's a lot more work, but it's far more interesting to do something like this, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree, and that's okay. One thing that I have been going back and forth on is the use of plants indoors, especially in these dark rooms. I could say they're fake. I mean, some of these dry grasses are basically dead anyway, but for some of the greener plants, it's a tough call. I do know places that have plants in nocturnal houses though, so it's not out of the question. Maybe we could use UV lighting or something. If people can grow marijuana in the attic, then I can have a banana leaf in a nocturnal house. Put it that way. The final phase of today's build, as you can no doubt guess, is the outdoor area. This is where we'll have our proper fix of rock work today. I am doing the sensible thing for once and starting with enrichment though. I knew that there would be something big, either a mud bath or a forage box, so I wanted to make sure that we would have plenty of space in the lower area, so that the guests would be able to have a good enough view. I hate the borders on these things, so I tend to try and cover them up, usually with rocks or tree trunks. But here I was able to pull up the terrain around the edges so that it fit more naturally into the ground. I wanted this outdoor area to resemble southern grasslands of America, you know, not a desert, but still quite dusty, with a lot of dry grasses and a few bits of tough greenery. Obviously I have some very nice rock formations, layered textures where it's exposed beneath the dirt, some small plateaus for the armadillos to climb and feel important, and maybe shoot for a 6-foot vertical from the ground. Who knows? I think having come from the mountains, my instinct go-to is more is better. So there's a question over whether there's too much in this habitat, but I don't think it negatively affects the outcome. With the right plants, it'll all tie in together. And the animals have no problems traversing it at all, so there are no limiting factors as a result of them. I might consciously tone it down a little bit for the next video though, we'll see. For the foliage, I started with a few small green bushes on the border. Maybe growing in from underneath, depending on how deep we want the concrete going. But I spread out more with the dry yellow bushes and grasses to keep that parched feel. Sprinkled with a few cacti. They're pretty robust when it comes to the less habitable conditions, and the armour on the dillos' backs should help them navigate the area without worrying about the occasional prick from them. I did plan for more trees around the outside of this enclosure, but I placed one and it cast so much shadow that it completely changed the aesthetic. So instead, I used a few of the thin palms. I don't know if that's a southern states sort of plant, but it fits in with the rest of the scenery nicely, so I have no problem saying that they were brought in from some sort of botanical garden somewhere. It's all very standard decoration from here on out, so here is my final bit of info for the armadillos. They may seem like harmless jumping beans who will befriend you for an ant cocktail and headbats, but beware. Much like the koalas over in Australia, these animals carry diseases one would commonly associate with humans. Although, koalas dropping from the trees with chlamydia is slightly funnier than armadillos with leprosy. So, think before you grab, or you might end up looking like Robert the Bruce's father in Braveheart. And with that lovely image, I will leave you to enjoy the rest of the video in peace. Again, if you like this new structure of the videos or the build today, please leave a like, and don't forget to submit your suggestions for the armadillo names in the comments. And subscribe to get easy access to more from this series and all the other stuff that I have in the works. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next one.